Olá, bem-vindos ao canal Free Fly People. Hoje nós temos aqui uma entrevista hiper super especial com um americano, Teddy Mack, e ele vai estar conversando comigo, claro, na língua dele, e falando sobre como ele começou no voo livre, especialmente na asa delta, ainda nos anos 60, com algumas imagens muito bacanas. Você que não entende o inglês, bem, vai precisar talvez passar por um tradutor disso tudo, mas teremos aqui futuramente a tradução dessa conversa para registrar, então, de acordo com o projeto Free Fly People, a gente está aí resgatando histórias da asa delta e do parapente. Então eu vou chamar esse ícone, essa lenda viva do voo livre para o nosso estúdio. So today we have a so nice interview with someone very, very special, living legend of hang gliding and the free flying history. And we shall talk about how he started to fly and how he developed wings and many other things, okay, to rescue here the stories of pioneers of hang gliding. So, Teddy, welcome.
Thank
you to accept my invitation.
Yes, I appreciate
Sorry,
you.
My English, Brazilian English.
No, your English is good. You're so nice. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Welcome. Welcome to accept to tell us your story, how you started, and everything we want to know, and we want to record this. You are a living legend.
Perfect. So I don't know about that. Maybe I'm an I maybe have infamousy. What is the word? Infamous. Not famous, but anyway, yeah. Thank you.
Well, it doesn't matter. You will make up. You make your part. You have your legacy. Yeah?
Absolutely.
For sure. So, thank you very much. And well, to start our interview, I really would like you tell us how and when you started to be involved, engaged with the free flight, okay? Where you were, and who made influence on you to start. And
perfect.
Don't forget the time and the age.
Okay, great. So really the journey started when I was like 13 years old. So when I was 13 years old, I read an article in Popular Mechanics magazine about the new sport of hang gliding. And I was enthralled by this. I really wanted to do it. My parents thought I was crazy. And anyway, but my family had an aviation background. My father, he flew planes for the military when I was younger. So anyway, I was 13 years old. I read this article, and then I was a paper boy in San Diego, and I was folding the newspaper one day, and I saw a photograph of a guy, and his name was Paul Hoffman, and he was the guy that lived in my neighborhood, and he was flying at Torrey Pines in San Diego. And I couldn't even believe it. I was like, I didn't even know there were people so close to me that were involved in this. I had gone out to Torrey Pines before and watched the guys fly, the older guys, and I wanted to be a part of that. So I reached out. I found him and another guy, and his name was Bud Barker, Daniel Barker, and they lived in my neighborhood, and they told me about a meeting that was every month in downtown San Diego near the Aerospace Museum. In the Rotary Club, and it was called the UFO Club, the Ultralight Flyers Organization. So basically one of the first clubs in Southern California. It was actually around the time of the Southern California Hang Gliding Association that later turned into the United States Hang Gliding Association. Anyway, so I convinced my mother to take me to this meeting, and I instantly became instant friends with a guy, Floyd Fronius, and also I met Paul Hoffman. I'd only spoke to him on the phone, and his friend Bud Barker. So these guys were already flying. They were making machines in their garages. They were making gliders out of basically bamboo, and then they took black plastic, and they were flying these gliders in the canyon behind their house. Maybe like a year.
When was this? Which time?
Okay, so
1960,
no,
65?
like early 70s. So I have to figure out the timeline because next week I'm 66. So at the time I was 13. So you can do the subtraction. It was like, I don't know, 53 years ago or something like that. 53 years ago. So anyway, so I went to the club, and I was a little bit of a pest. I was a young kid and had a lot of energy, and my mother became friends with Floyd Fronius, his mother. And so they became like the mothers of the hang gliding kids. And so anyway, I needed to buy a glider, and I had saved my money when I was 14 years old. I saved my money and I bought my first glider, and actually I got ripped off. It was a glider some guys had made it, some motorcycle guys, and they had put it behind a motorcycle and towed it up and immediately crashed, and then one guy broke his arm, and they fixed the glider. And I saw the glider in the newspaper, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I bought it, and I got ripped off. And then I took it to the club, and my friends were like, "This is a terrible glider, get rid of it." So I sold it for $200. And then the club took me when I was 14 years old. I went with Floyd Fronius and the group, they call the UFO Club, and we went down to Mexico to a place called Cantamar. It's a sand dune by Rosarito Beach, maybe like 30 minutes south of the border. So anyway, they had this glider. It was called a Velderin, and it was a small company that was making these gliders in Los Angeles.
I see.
And it was like, yeah. So anyway, they wanted to make me the first volunteer to fly the glider, and I had no experience. And they put me in the glider, and they told me run down the hill and push out. So that's what I did. So I ran down the hill.
What did you feel when you saw them doing this? You were so excited to fly.
Oh yeah,
You didn't see the danger.
I'd seen the activity before. Just watching it, I took the bus out to Torrey Pines and watched some guys, and they were flying, and I was like, I was mesmerized. I was just like, it was magic to me. I couldn't even believe it,
So nice. So let me know what inspired you to start Thunderbird, and how had it evolved over the past 30 years?
13 years. So anyway, Thunderbird was like the fourth company. So the first company I purchased from Bill Bennett of Delta Wing. He had moved the factory from Van Nuys, California to San Diego, and he had taken over the lease at Torrey Pines, and he had bought that lease from my friends from Flight Realities. They were the first hang gliding shop in San Diego, the first one. And they made their own equipment, and they had their own little school, and they taught in the same place down in Cantamar. So anyway, he had purchased the lease from them, and I had saved money for a long time, and I had a little money, not a lot. And unfortunately, Bill Bennett's wife, she was dying of cancer, and he needed some really fast money. He didn't care at that point about anything. He just wanted to try to save her. So I gave him what money I had. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was some money. It was like $20,000 that I'd saved for years. And at the time, I think I was maybe around 40 years old, maybe a little bit younger. And I purchased the company, and I had no idea what I had. I didn't realize that I actually had the world, And so I purchased the company, and at that point, there was a lot of people that maybe didn't like him, but he had dealerships all over the world, and he was the partner of Bill Moyes in San Diego, in Australia. So they separated, and he brought hang gliding to America. I mean, it was already there, but he brought the first big factory that was Delta Wing, and that operated out of Van Nuys, California. And at a certain point, the lease became very expensive in Los Angeles, so he decided to move to San Diego. So he moved the factory to San Diego, and there was a lot of other hang gliding companies at the time. The competition was really fierce. And anyway, So at that time, I purchased the company. So he took the money that I had, like the $20,000, and he threw it at his wife's cancer, and it didn't help, and she died anyway. God bless her. So anyway, the first year we had the factory, we manufactured 100 gliders. So that was a big accomplishment for us, 100 gliders.
So
And
nice.
yeah, and so, and my business associate, the guy who was working for me, was also originally working for Bill Bennett. His name was Cameron Blevins, and he went
Mm-hmm.
on to be of the fame of North Wing. He worked for first. He left my company, and then he went to Pacific Airwave, and then that company folded, and then he was working for Moyes and manufacturing equipment for them. They would send the sales from Australia, and he was manufacturing for them, and then eventually he just started North Wing. So that's the legacy, basically. So when I was young,
Yes, yes.
so
Being young, I really would like to know. I would like you to tell us about your first glider and the journey that led you to join the hang gliding club
okay,
at just 13 years
okay,
old.
great.
You said before your mother something like this, but can you explain
Yeah, so
more?
my mom took me to the hang gliding club, and I met Floyd Fronius. He's a behind the scene person in hang gliding. Has been involved since the beginning, and anyway, he's a really good guy. So his family was an aviation family. His father flew sailplanes, and when hang gliding came, they started the hang gliding club. They called it the UFO Club, the Ultralight Flyers Organization in San Diego. So there's a lot of famous guys that were a part of that club, and one of them was Burke Ewing, and Burke Ewing was the guy that started Hawk hang gliding. And he became famous because he was the first guy ever to fly with his dog Curtis. Curtis would run
Wow.
back and forth and run back and forth and wanted to go with Burke. So
Okay.
yeah, so
Curtis was the dog. That's it.
Curtis was the first dog ever to
Curtis.
fly in a hang glider. So basically, what Burke did is made a very special harness so that Curtis could fly on his back. And so
Wow.
Curtis would just fly and sit on Burke's back, and we would go everywhere and fly. So we became a group. There was a group of us.
Yes.
We were very young. The first competition I went to, I was 14, and I had my Flexi Flyer, was the second glider I bought. And then I flew that one until I was 17 years old. And so, I went to this little club, and the little club had a little competition, and I won the award as the youngest pilot. So I was 14 years old, and the only person that was actually younger than me at the time in hang gliding was the guy Hall Brock. So his father was the genius behind Ultralight Products. He had the factory up in Santa Ana, California. So, these people were hippies, and they taught Hall when he was really too young, and he didn't understand. So very sad. It's a tragedy, and I don't want to cause any pain for Pete Brock if he sees this interview, but there was an accident, and unfortunately Hall perished when he was 10 years old. It's heartbreaking. So
Okay.
anyway,
What was the funeral you saw
okay, that was
about
different. So
the
that
sport?
was when I was 17. So we'll go forward from that. So I hooked up with Burke when I was like maybe 16. I think I was in high school, and we were friends from the club. And Burke, was already a bit famous because he did the video with him and with the dog.
I
And
see. I would
he was
like to know how you lived an emotional experience attending your first hang gliding funeral when you were
it
16 or
was it,
17.
it was heartbreaking. So I was 17
Yes,
years old, and
but
our
how did
friends.
you how did you shape the understanding about the risk of the sport?
Well, that was the minute I actually realized. I knew that there was fatalities in hang gliding. I had never seen it, and
You got shocked, I think.
yeah. So I wasn't there that day, but I was there for the funeral. So what happened was is that Steve Spurlock, he was a famous guy and he was towing at SeaWorld. And what they were doing is they were towing, behind a boat, and then at a certain point behind a car. And he would do air shows at SeaWorld. He would do it like 3 or 4 times a day. He would tow up, fly around, come in, and land. And so they were doing an experiment with the 7075 tubing, the tubing that they use now in the modern hang gliders, but it was very thick, the wall of the tubing. They didn't realize it wasn't thick enough. And so they did the air show, and normally when they were towing by a boat, and then at this air show, they were towing with a vehicle, and it had a stick shift. So every time they shifted the car, it created a load that went up, and then when it shifted, the glider took a lot of stress, and then the crossbar of the glider broke. And it was in front of like everybody in San Diego. Like everybody was there, the whole hang gliding community. I wasn't there that day, but Floyd was there. And it was before parachutes and hang gliding. So he spun and spun and spun, and he almost came out of it. There was a couple times that people thought he was going to make it, but he didn't, and he was killed instantly. And I found out about it the next day. It was a big shock. Like, I really love this guy. Yeah, it was horrible. Yeah. So I went to the funeral. The funeral was in the landing zone of Palomar Mountain. Back then, the Indians allowed us to land in the landing zone off of Palomar Mountain. But it became too much of a spectacle, and they had cattle, and the tourists were watching us, and they weren't respecting the boundaries, and so at that point the people were like, yeah, you can't do this activity here anymore. But that's where we used to fly. That was actually my first high altitude flight in hang gliding was there at Palomar Mountain when I was like 16 years old. So that was like several thousand feet. So anyway, the funeral was there. I went to the funeral, and I was sitting next to my friends. Everybody was crying, and it impacted me. It was
for sure. It's natural.
Difficult
when you lose someone. Yes, lose someone, especially during the sport we love. Yes, it's shock because that put us to see. Wow, could be me. Could be I.
It happens. So, hang gliding, it's not badminton, it's not pickleball, it's hang gliding. It's very extreme. And the thing about our community, people say that we have a death wish, but that's not true. It's a life wish. I'm getting a little emotional. So anyway, yeah, it's in this community, we're very strong worldwide, even though it's highly competitive, and, on a certain level, the competitiveness is ruthless because there's no money in it. There's absolutely no money in it. It's just for the love of it. Maybe there's a couple of guys that make money in it with people that own factories. But the old saying is, if you want to make a little bit of money in hang gliding, you start with a lot. So anyway, that was hard, the funeral. And
let's talk about something nice.
Well, we will, but I just want to finish that. So what happened was I'm sitting there with my friends, and there was a woman, Eileen Adams. She was famous in hang gliding. She was Torrey Pines' person. There was Jim DeBush. He was also famous. And Burke Ewing, and all these people from Flight Realities, Bob Skinner and Robbie Skinner, her wife, and all the people from the UFO Club. We were all there. And right when they were coming, they came to sprinkle his ashes over the landing field, and these guys flying these gliders, and they came in high, and they came over and they were sprinkling the ashes, and when that happened, there was the thermal that lifted off, and I'll never forget it. There was red tail hawk, and it just took that thermal and it thermaled up to where these hang glider guys were, and that was where they had released Steve's ashes. In my recollection, I mean, it's a long time ago, but I was impacted, and I looked at my friend and I said, "It's an omen." And my friend looked at me. It was Eileen Adams. She lives in Hawaii now. She's very famous in hang gliding in the early days, but she said to me, "It's his spirit being released." So that impacted me. So anyway, so we can talk about something happy now, but that's the reality of the sacrifice that hang gliding people do to live this sport. It's a very, very kind of special person that does this. I guess we're a special kind of crazy. We're good crazy. So I don't know. We can move on.
Yes. So, I know you started very young, but you received the award for the youngest pilot
in San Diego
when you were 13 years old. So, what were the emotion in that moment?
Well,
your ego. How was
basically my friends thought I was the pass because they were older than me, so they were like, okay, here's this award, kid. It's like, it was funny. So it wasn't like a big deal. I just felt a little proud. My parents were a little proud, and it was cool. And but the thing is that my friends were older. They were like a couple years older, and Burke was several years older. And in our little group, the thing about it is that I would just get on the telephone, during the summer, and I would call everybody. I would be like, are you going flying today? Are you going flying today? Are you going flying today? And because I couldn't drive. And so, it was Burke, first the people from Flight Realities, but actually it was Burke that tucked me underneath his wing. And there was our group. And the group was a group of people. It was me. It was Bud Barker, Dan Barker. It was Floyd Fronius and Paul Hoffman, and there's another guy, Doc, was Burke's friend, and he was a dentist, and Burke's girlfriend, and Curtis, and another guy, John Lasco. He was a friend, and he went to the same high school. So it was very unusual. Like, we were pioneers of hang gliding, and all three of us went to the same high school. And the other guys were a couple years older than me. So the group, it was our little tribe, and in the summer, every day it was a different call. We would call, and there was a weather machine, and we would call, and it would tell us what the wind was going to be that day. So whatever the wind was that day, Burke would pick us up, and we would go. Basically, he would come and pick us all up one by one. We'd throw all the gliders onto the car. Sometimes he had friends with him too, and we would stuff all these people in the van with the dog, and we would go. One day it was Elsinore, the next day Palomar, Torrey Pines, but they wouldn't let me fly Torrey Pines because I was too young. And the place we flew, where Burke was teaching everyone, was a place called Santee Mountain. So it was a little mountain, like not far from my house. It was down in El Cajon, Santee area. And but now, unfortunately, development came, and it gobbled up the mountain, the houses, and they built a high school. And so we no longer have that site. But that was the traditional site where we all learned. And then the other place that we went to was a place called Black Mountain. There was Little Black Mountain that was in Poway. And then later on, some of the older guys, they found another place where they started flying thermals really early. Like, these are people flying thermals and standards, and that was Big Black Mountain. And that was about the time that parachutes came into hang gliders. And these guys were, they were flying like, standards, but, slightly modified standards with a little bit more performance. And these guys were the first guys I knew that were flying cross country. And anyway, yeah, so I was like 16, 17. So
I would like to know if was there any woman participating?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. There were women there were definitely women in the sport. There was Linda Myers of Will's Wing and Mike Myers. That's when Will's Wing was in Santa Ana, California. It was or maybe Elsinore. I can't remember, but they started very small. They started the operation in 2 small storage containers. They were active pilots, and then there was Eileen Adams. She was a active pilot. There was other women. Robbie Skinner. She's remarried now, and unfortunately, her new husband passed away from cancer, I think. But she's very famous in San Diego. She had a party actually recently with all some old time guys that were all part of that organization. A guy, John McVie, he was one of the guys that taught me how to fly, and Burke was there, and a couple other people. So anyway, yeah, she was a pilot, really good pilot, Robbie. Yeah, and she was older than me. You know, I was like young, and I had this crazy crush on her, which is funny, but we're still friends to this day. Yeah, she was a lovely human being. She was an artist, and what she did was she did airbrush T-shirts, and she made all these beautiful T-shirts for all the flyers. And
Wow.
on these T-shirts were long sleeve T-shirts. So on the sleeve,
nice.
she had done the airbrush of a hawk, the wings, and in the back it was like maybe like Isis, like the flying goddess, and then all the shirts were all clouds, and these people, you know, they were hippies.
Oh, nice.
And they would wear, and they also would do it with the pants. So that was the little uniform of these people, and seriously, we're a tribe. I mean, it was real, and
Fantastic.
yeah, it's a long time ago, but I can remember it.
Wow, so nice.
Yesterday, it was like it was yesterday. I mean, life is fast. So yeah. So anyway, that's where I.
Yes. So nice to have someone taking care about this, making shirts, and that stimulate the growth. Fantastic. I would like to know about how was your visit to the Navajo Nation? I know you went to visit the Navajo Nation in your time at Window Rock, and how was the impact on your perspective, on the connection between flying
so
and
what happened was
spirituality.
Yeah, Thunderbird. So when I started the Thunderbird company, it was a point in my life where I'd had Delta Wing, and then it failed, and then we became Air Sports International, and then that failed, and then we were undercapitalized. We just didn't have the money, and we tried really our best. And so what brought me to Navajo Nation was I was at Palomar one time, and I was looking for places to land. We had lost the landing area. Sometimes we would lose the landing area, sometimes not. There was places where it was legal we could land, and other places with private property. So I went to a place, and it was a campground. I don't think it's even there anymore because I went back and looked for it. But there was people living there, and there was a guy, he was Navajo, and he saw the hang glider, and we had this conversation, and he was like, and I talked to him about it, and I talked to him about some books that I had read when I was younger. I read a book by Carlos Castaneda, and I read some other books about Indian belief system. So I was curious about it, and he gave me eagle feathers, and that was the beginning of my journey to the Navajo. He was a medicine person from Navajo tribe, but apparently he'd lost his way, and he had some substance abuse issues. But I traveled to the Navajo. I was really, really curious about it. I'd read the books. I was interested in their belief system, and basically, from what I spoke to them about it, like not him, but the other people, when I went to Navajo and went to Window Rock, is basically what I was told by these people was the creator has a lot of different names. So, and I got blessed, I developed a really beautiful relationship with those people, so I went to Window Rock, and I had the hang glider, and I pulled in there, and there was an elder from the Navajo people, and he said, "Park over there." And I parked right there, and this is the place, was the memorial to the code talkers. They were the people that that helped the Allies win the Second World War, because they spoke in Navajo. And the Germans and no one could break the code because they were speaking in a language that no one knew it. So anyway, I parked there, and normally they don't let people spend the night there, but they let me spend the night. I was there. I had my eagle feather, and basically I got blessed. They accepted me, and I've been back there several times and visit them. Anyway, as part of their belief system, they believe that, and I don't know, it's not any crazier than any other religion, but they believe that, that would come what they call the bird tribe. And, and the bird tribe, this would become at the end of the age, bird when it's tribe. The beginning of the old age and the beginning of the new age, right? And I related to it because we had our own little bird tribe, but at the same time, I'm thinking of the free flight people, the hang gliding people, the paragliding people, the people that have the different disciplines. Yeah. So I spoke to them about it, and I was like, are you guys cool if we do flying on the res? And they were like, well, you have to have permission. So, and I went back there several times, and I won't get into the details, but at one point I was invited to a ceremony, and it was life-changing for me. Wow. I can't really speak of it. I can't. But what I can say is just that it was beautiful. They showed me a place. Special, huh? Yeah, it was special. They showed me a place that I didn't even know existed. It was a spirit realm. Basically, they showed me that what exists in reality is not necessarily what we see in this physical world, because we're so caught up in in making money and pop culture and all these things. So anyway, I got blessed by them, and then I started speaking to them about maybe possibly opening the there's a lot of really good hang gliding sites on the tribe, really great places, and they've got a couple of airports, and and I said, hey, is it a possibility that we could do a competition there? And they said, yeah, if it benefits the tribe. So I talked to some people about it, and they were like, what benefit could it have for the tribe? Well, what's going on there is the same place they have, all over the United States and basically all over the world right now, is people with substance abuse problems, and it's really a bad problem on the reservation. So anyway, so I said, hey, we could do a benefit with the hang gliding community. I said, look, I'm not a pro. We'd let the pros do this thing. I'm willing to help, and we'll talk to the pros about it. So I reached out to people. There were pros and people from all over the world were really excited about the idea where, the entry fee would go to the tribe, and that money would be set aside for recovery for people that have, alcohol and drug problems. So that was beautiful. And, and I was speaking to them about, like the bird tribe, and, they're like, well, maybe they were, they're very simple people. They're like, well, maybe it's you guys, maybe it's not, but we'll see. So anyway, I'm hoping to make that happen in the spring. So that was the significance of that. Yeah, it was, beautiful thing. And since then I go back there every time. And, what happened was there was a genocide that happened. They were moved off their land in Oklahoma. There's this thing that happened. They called it the Trail of Tears, and they marched these people in the winter, from there to where Window Rock is. But previous to that, there was a genocide because the Spaniards came, and they were, they found some gold, and they were like, where's the gold? And they wanted to convert these people to Catholicism.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So
yes, we know what's happening. And not just over there, but many places, the same. Yeah?
Yeah, it's sad. Yeah. But the thing about it is that this genocide happened. And regardless of that, they forgave us. Like, not all of them, but, during the Second World War, well, when they got to Window Rock, there's like a rock it's like an archway. And they got there in the winter time, but they were given this land. But the thing about it is that first winter, half the tribe died, and maybe a third of the tribe, I don't know how many people, but a lot of people, the old people and the children, died on the way there. So, but what they had was, there was a lot of animals. There was game. There was elk, and there was deer and other animals and fish. So they were able to survive And then the next year, when it rained, there was a waterfall that came off the window rock, and that's where they decided that that's where they were going to build their nation, and that is their most holy spot on the reservation is Window Rock, and that's where I went. So I don't know. That's the story of Window Rock and my journey with the Dene people. They call themselves Dene. The Spaniards called them Navajo, which is not a nice name. It means dirty thief, and the reason that happened because they starved these people, and the only way that they could survive sometimes was to steal. So anyway,
nice. They're very nice to know about all this.
Yeah, they're Dene. So anyway, and because I've gone back there several times, and
I see,
and they've accepted me, and it's very, very unusual.
Very unusual. Special for you, huh?
I feel blessed. Yeah.
Very special.
So yeah, and I told them there's a really nice little sand dune there, and I said, hey, I'll give you free lessons for everybody there. And then they were like, how much is it going to cost? I was like, nothing. We can bring some instructors, and we can show these they're poor, so except for the ones that run the tribe. I mean, they own casinos and stuff, and it's like any other society. Unfortunately it's nepotism. So the people on top have all the money, but the tribal members themselves, they're poor, and some of the places
that happens the same in Canada. I am a resident permanent from Canada too, and I went to visit some tribes too, and the reality is the same. It's not different here in Brazil too. Unfortunately, what can we say? Because many things works because money, and they don't support Amerindians as should do it. Yes, it's a pity, but the most important, you had a great experience with them, and I think they add too much to your not just physical life, but your spiritual life.
It helped me in my journey. It helped me in my journey with hang gliding. It was great. So anyway, but the most amazing thing that I found. The most amazing thing that I found about it is, even though all of this happened, they don't hate us. I mean, some individual people do, but they don't. They're very close to the earth, and they're like, what purpose is it for us to hate? Because that's not going to help us. That's not going to help the world. So it's special to me. So okay, so I'm running out of batteries, so let's move on.
Okay. So, I would like to know if you have something more about Floyd Fronius, because he was very important to you. He was your instructor, and I would like to know your early experience with instructors like him.
How Floyd is great.
Your passion and your skill to be a pilot.
It's like we met yesterday. I mean, I'm friends with him. I'm friends with his children, his wife, all the common friends. We've been friends forever. He's a brilliant designer. He's friends with some very, very, very special hang gliding people. He's friends with Eric Raymond. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's a guy that was one of the first guys to fly the Owens Valley in a glider called the Voyager, and he went on. And he made a man-powered sailplane, pedal-powered, and they crossed the English Channel. And then later on, they had an electric-powered one, and Floyd helped with all the engineering on that. He's brilliant. The guy's like basically a genius, like a lot of hang gliding people, are really, really smart people. So Floyd, he's a machinist, and he's always made parts for aviation equipment. And so he makes parts for a lot of different companies. He made parts for Quicksilver. He designs parts for, all kind of different projects, right? And he makes all the parts for Northwing, and he makes parts for me. And he's one of the behind the scenes people that people don't really know about, but his friend Mike Sandlin was a designer, and then they made this thing called the Goat. So it's a foot pin. It's like It's like a little airplane hang glider, but it's 3-axis. It's got a stick like a regular sailplane, and it's got a wheel in the front, and it's self-launching. They just lift the flaps and push the stick forward, and it just rolls off the mountain. And yeah, so he's brilliant, and I'm hoping that I'm not sure if you spoke to him, but he definitely wants to do the interview with you.
Wow, great. We were talking before, and you mentioned it, meeting Steve Moyes when you were 17 years old.
So that was
and you received the invitation to Rio de Janeiro. That's it?
Yeah, so that was really interesting. So what happened is that like my glider, my third glider was what they called a Cal glider. It was a glider that was, and I bought it from a guy, Don Dorfler. There was a little group of guys that had a small hang gliding operation, and they were cool. They were hippies, and and then so I bought a glider from them, but it was on top of a car, and someone in a parking lot backed into it and hit it and put a dent in the tubing. So I went to the World Hang 10 Open in Escape Country. I think I was like 17 years old, and you had to do the inspection, and it didn't pass the inspection. And then I didn't have the parts to fix it, and I was like trying to get the parts to fix it, and then I was fixing it, and then came this huge rainstorm, and the whole place turned into mud, and I was so depressed. I was 17. I wasn't going to be able to fly in the competition. Basically, my mom she was like scared, so she just like drove me up there and dropped me off with all these guys. So I remember I was sitting and so I had to get the glider. It had all this mud on it, and I brought it over to this campground. It was horrible. And I was sitting at this table, and these guys were like basically the lords of hang gliding. Like I didn't even know. So hold on a second, I lost you. Just a second. I don't know where you went. One moment. Okay, gotta go back to you. Sorry. I lost you. I don't know where you went. Okay, so basically, yeah. So I was sitting at this table, and at the table was the most famous people in hang gliding in the world, but a lot of them I knew. So it was Bob Wills, Chris Wills, the Wills brothers. Then it was Steve Moyes, another guy, Reggie Jackson, me, and another guy, what's the guy's name? David Beardsley. He was a really, really famous guy. He was a test pilot, and he flew. And another guy, I'm trying to think of what his name was. He had a company called Sports Kites, and Burke Ewing. So we're just all sitting there at a campground. I'm like 17 years old. I didn't know that I was sitting next to the world champion of hang gliding, Steve Moyes. I had no idea who he was, And he was like, "Oh, that was your glider that was in the mud." And I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "What happened?" And I was like, "Yeah, somebody, backed into it, like before, and put a dent in it, and I can't fly it, and this and that, and blah blah blah." So and Eileen Adams too as well, and Jim DeBush. They were flying for a different company. There was a lot of hang gliding companies back then in California. Like, I don't know, dozens of them, and everybody had their little brand. So anyway. So the next morning, it's like 4:00 in the morning, like sunrise, and Steve, he's in a 1957 Chevy panel wagon bread truck, and basically, he was so famous, and I didn't even know. This guy's like the champion all over the world, and he had he grabs me and he says, "Hey, we're gonna take a ride," and I was like, "Okay, cool." I mean, I liked him, but I didn't really know who he was. I just knew he was from Australia. So, and there's people there from all over the world. It's this competition. It was cool. So we drove to Los Angeles. We drove to LAX. We left really early in the morning so that we could get there before the traffic, so that we would be leaving LA as people were going into LA. So he's like, "Hey, wait here." So we double parked on the curb, which is like illegal, but he's like, "If the cops come, just say that you're going to your friend went to get some luggage." And I was like, "Okay." So he comes out with 2 boxes, and I'm like, "Okay, you got some gliders, great." They came from the factory. Well, I didn't know it, but that night he went and he went went to a telephone and he called the factory in Australia and he talked to his father and he said, we're going to sponsor this kid, Teddy. And I couldn't even believe it. I didn't even know. I had no idea what was happening. I mean, he was such a good person. He has such a good heart. And so we throw these gliders on there. We're driving, you know, and I'm like, okay. I go, hey, so what you got there? He goes, I got the Mini and the Maxi. I'm like, okay, the Maxi. He goes, yeah, that's our newest design. I'm going to fly the Maxi. And I go, what about the Mini? I mean,
so nice.
I'm moved to tears right now because he was so kind. And you know, I didn't have money, and
do you still have contact with him?
Well, Steve and I are close, but the thing about it is that he went through some complications with cancer, and he survived. He's a very, very private person now. I talked to Vicky, his sister, and I was supposed to go to Australia before the pandemic, and then the pandemic came, and I didn't go. But she was like, "We're going to make."
So nice to have him talking about his history, his family, and about his father, the manufacturer.
So it's possible. So, you know, but anyway, it's weird because I was tied together with this lineage. So, and I don't even know how. It was just like a miracle. So Steve came and he was like, yeah, that's the Mini. That's for you. I was just like dumbfounded. I'm like, you're giving me a new glider? He's like, no. He goes, it's a demo. He's like, if you do well in the competition, it's yours. But anyway, we're going to go to Rio de Janeiro and we want to take you with us. And I was like, what? Like Rio de Janeiro? I mean, it's like my life's dream at that point. I'd seen like, you know, movies of guys flying in Rio de Janeiro with hang gliders. I couldn't even believe it. So he's like, you got to put it together to prove you can fly it. So I was working with Burke. I knew how to put together a glider. So, you know, I put the leading edges on. I put it all together, everything. And he's like, great, you know, you're in. You're on the Moyes team. I didn't even know what that meant. So, you know, I flew in the competition. I went through 2 rounds of elimination. It was a simple competition back then. It was actually fun because it wasn't like big cross country. You know, we'd take off from the 1,500-foot hill. We'd fly around and then go down to the 1,000-foot hill and then fly around. And there was like this big sign that said escape country. And then you got 360 points, like if you did a 360. So there was another famous guy there, Dave Muir, I think his name was, like he's really famous guy from Northern California. And he talked me into doing it. He's like, okay, look, he's like, you just like go to the left or the right and you push out and you make circles, right? So I was terrified. And I was like, I did a couple of circles and, you know, and then I flew the little pylon course and it came in and I hit the spot landing. I did okay. So then we went to the second round and then so I did okay during that one. And then the third round of eliminations, what happened was that they had this area that was called out of bounds. And I was 17 and I asked my other friend, I was like, this guy, Bob Skinner, he was the guy that owned Flight Realities in San Diego. And I was like, can you launch me? He goes, well, you're flying in the world championships, right? And I'm like, right. He goes, so you're a world-class pilot, apparently, right? And I go, I guess so. And he goes, you are. He's like, believe it. So I launched and I took off and it was like a lot of wind and I got really, really high and I did my 360s and everything. But there was the pylon course. You had to go past these flags. And you go past one and then they wave that you made it and you go back to the second one and then you wave it. And I went past the third one and I was just getting higher and higher and higher and higher. Well, I'm not going to say the lady cheated, but like her boyfriend, if I would have made the pylon, and I'm not trying to blame anybody else, but, if I made the pylon, I would have knocked him out. So I thought I made it, but from my angle, I was above it. But she said I didn't make it. So I did a 360, came around, hit the pylon again, came in and I didn't make it past the line, the outline. And so I got disqualified and I didn't make it to the final round. So Steve went on, he won second in the competition. The number one guy was the guy, Paul Courtney, and we're still friends to this day. this very, very famous guy in Hawaii. So, they were doing aerobatics like in Hawaii. Like, there was a group of guys in Hawaii. Bob Wills came to Hawaii and met David Godo, gave him 1 day of training, put him on a Wills wing glider and threw him off of Makapu, and that's how Godo is like, it was like, oops, sorry, I don't know what happened, but anyway, I got to go back to this. Yeah, it was like, okay, live or die. Like, there you go. So Godo, he made it. And so then they had this other little group. It was like Godo, and there was another guy, Mike Doran, but they called him Mike Van Doren, is his famous artist. And then there was John Limburg, and also his brother. I'm trying to remember what his brother was, Guy Limburg. Okay. And then there were these guys, and Paul Courtney. Now, Paul Courtney was this guy, and he was from New Zealand, and this guy was just like next level. I mean, these guys are like in the 1970s, and I remember watching the video at the club when I was younger of these guys doing spins and wingovers and flying out to Rabbit Island, which is off the coast of Makapu, coming back and just doing all this crazy stuff. I couldn't even believe it. So for the competition, the very last round was what they called aerial ballet. And so, so the one guy, I'm trying to remember what his name is, really famous guy. He owns the company now. They make ultralights called the Challenger, but I can't recall his name right now. Anyway, so he was with these other guys, and they were sponsored by a rolling paper company, like the rolling paper, they're called Easy Wider. It's the rolling paper, like Zigzag. So anyway, they were sponsored by this guy, and they did this aerial ballet with this other two guys and this guy, and it wasn't that great because they didn't synchronize with the music. So secondly was Steve Moyes. I don't remember what song that he played, but it was like fantastic. It was like his thing was just perfect. He came in, landed perfect. Everything was perfect, right? Well, then came Paul Courtney, and Paul Courtney got really, really, really high. Like he was thermaling, and this is before a lot of us even understood what thermaling was. And he got, I don't know how high. Like, he launched at 1,500. He probably came over the landing area with maybe like $4,000 or $5,000, maybe 4,000 or something, right? And they start this song by the Moody Blues, and it called Ride My Seesaw. And in the song, it talks about like, flying through the sun, and, and he starts doing these circles and circles and circles and circles. And then the song breaks out and it says, fly. And then he's just doing a spin from 4,000 feet, like, and then he came in and just boom, landed, and everyone went crazy, and he won the competition. So Steve won for second place, and Paul Courtney won first place, and then the other guy, I can't remember his name. I'm just old. Famous guy. I should know his name. He'll probably be mad if he sees this interview because I can't remember his name. But anyway, that guy, he won third. So that was amazing. And then, so Steve was like, hey man, we're going to go to Torrey Pines. And I called my mom and said, I got to ride down to Torrey Pines. And she's like, and my family was actually watching this on television. Like, the first and second eliminations, and the third elimination when I got disqualified. But I had the family support, and I didn't even know that. And then, so we went down there, and Steve was going to fly Torrey Pines, and then he went and he spoke to my mother, and he was, and this really made me sad because, I never made it to Rio. So he was like, look, this is what we're doing. Like, we're going to take Teddy. He's promising, and we're going to take him down to Rio de Janeiro, and he's going to hang out with us and, bring some gliders down there. He's going to be part of the Moyes family. And my mom freaked out. She's like, he can't go. He's got to finish high school. So that was crazy. So I didn't get to go, and then I didn't see Steve again for decades. He went his way and I went mine. I followed his career, and anyway, so he came with this very famous guy from Rio de Janeiro to San Diego. Now, this was a guy that was a poor guy, and I'm trying to think of what his name is, Paulo or Paulino. This guy's a famous guy in Rio. And he was like a poor kid. He was a street kid, and he had like the dirt on his face and like living on the.
Don't you remember his name, the Brazilian guy?
I'm trying to remember, but he's we'll figure it out. Anyway, it's just like
from Rio de Janeiro.
Yeah, he was in Rio. So what he did, he's a famous guy. He was the Brazilian champion at that time.
What year was this? Do you remember the year?
Like 91. 1991. Yeah, so he came with Steve Moyes, and they were doing the test flying at Torrey Pines for the extra light. And what happened was that Torrey Pines is tricky. Anyway, this guy, he because he was a kid, and every time they would land, they would give him a couple of some money, and he would break the gliders down for them so they could hang out. He would go break the gliders down, and then he was raised in hang gliding. Like, he was just raised by the sport.
Yes.
And then he had children, and he became the champion. I have to remember his name. I'll do the research. But anyway, so he went to Torrey Pines, and Torrey Pines is tricky. It looks like it's just easy, but that day it was blowing really hard, and the thing about it is there's certain canyons, and in these canyons the wind goes up the canyons and creates this rotor space, and where the wind is spilling over the canyon, creating mechanical turbulence. It's like really not safe to fly back there, but he didn't know, so he was doing aerobatics. Well, right there is the golf course, and they had done like this remodel on the golf course because they were going to do this famous Torrey Pines Open competition. And so what they did is they took a bunch of fence posts, like out of beams, and they cut them all at this different levels, and they put a chain around them, like a chain from a boat. And so his maneuver was unsuccessful, and so he had to recover. So he went down and was flying by, and he was going to fly out to the sea, and he would have been fine, but he didn't see the poles, and he hit the poles with the chain and died instantly. And it was heartbreaking. So, by then I had my factory, and I was hanging out with my girlfriend of the time, and her name was Shelley Dunn. She was like a famous radio personality. We had met at Torrey Pines. I had landed on the beach, and we became friends, and she helped me carry my glider up the hill, and we just became a thing. So anyway, I'm watching this television with her, the news, and there's a fatality at Torrey Pines. So I was like, oh, fuck. Or, excuse me, I was like, oh, gee. So I just hopped in my truck, and I went to Torrey Pines. I pull in there, and I see Steve and his wife, and they're crying. And I was like, oh, my God. And he's like, Teddy, what's up? I hadn't seen him like in 20 years or something. Like, I don't even know. It's like 40 then. I hadn't seen the guy in 23 years or something. But we were just like picked up right where we picked up. He goes, we got to go. He's like, hop in the truck. So we went over there, and we had to recover the glider. And we were there as they were taking the body off the location. And the family was a mess. Like he was like the uncle. He was like the godfather to Steve's children, and they were a mess. So I got them, and I took them to a hotel, and then me and Steve made the arrangements, and the next day we had to go down and take care of business for the family, to get him back to Brazil and stuff. And yeah, that was the second time I saw Steve. I only saw him twice in my life, but we were so close, and there was so much love, and he was like, hey, anytime you come to Australia.
Anyway, I think you have a picture of him, huh? I would like to show some pictures, and I want to explain. Let's see the pictures.
Okay, sure.
Let's see the pictures.
It's a picture of Steve I got off the internet, but sure, yeah, put the picture up.
Let me
anyway,
see.
Yeah, we're close. I'm sorry to have to talk about all that.
Let me see here. I will share the screen with you. Let me see here. Okay, I think we have some pictures here, huh?
Okay. I'm running out of battery, so let's go. Let's see what we got going here. So, okay, so that's that story. So that's the Porsche with the hang glider, and some guys in Brazil bought the Porsche, and they brought it in, and then we had an adventure, and we drove this car over the Andes Mountains, and the engine had a problem in Argentina, and we met some gauchos and a guy that towed us with a taxi, and we went to this location, and they had a big party. I was nervous, so they had a big party for me. So that was like a big adventure. So that's us. I think I'm pretty sure that we're like pulling into Mendoza, Argentina there. So okay, there was that story. Okay.
Okay.
That was me and the guy Diego. So anyway.
I see. Let me see another picture. Wait a little. If you want to continue speaking about, I can make you.
Well, that story is like a whole nother story. So that's for a different day. It was a big adventure. So
okay. Do you have something more to talk about Burke Edwin?
Yeah, Burke
Curtis,
yeah,
the flying dog.
The picture of Burke and his company would be good. The Hawk hang gliding company. So let's see if you got that picture. It's the picture of Burke with the butterfly glider. So
wait a little. What is this?
Okay, that's it. So that's the advertisement of Burke Ewing, and then so basically that is the butterfly glider, and Burke painted that glider, and then so it says fly hawk, fly high. That's the picture. I believe that's at Torrey Pines. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, that's at Torrey Pines, and that's Burke flying. And I'm not sure if Curtis is here with them. And then there's a list of all their dealerships. They had some dealerships. Let me see where they were. Let's see. They had one and
so nice.
Different places, picture. Yeah. So there's one in Arizona, one in Monterey, one in Washington, nice. One in Wyoming, and like a couple other locations. So yeah, and they were out of La Jolla, California. So yeah, that's where Burke was from, and Burke was the guy that we ran around with him in our little group, our little tribe.
Wow, you.
Okay, so that's me on the Navajo. So that's like a kind of a tourist location, but I met a guy there, and a long time ago, and he was like his family owns this Ortega India Center, and they were like, hey, anytime you're coming through, feel free, you can spend the night here. So it's a safe location when I'm traveling through, and and that's me and Diego, and we got the little Thunderbird bumper sticker on the back.
Wow,
and that was crazy fun. Yeah, so that's a mosquito harness, and
this picture was took in Brazil.
No, that's in Playa del Mar in Chile.
Okay.
So so the car was they owned the car, but like also I was the owner of the car, and so I had to bring the car to
Uruguay?
them, and I didn't make any money out of it. The whole deal was I just would get to fly Rio, and it never happened, unfortunately. It get to go on, which is fun. But anyway,
wow.
That guy was Formula One driver, so it was pretty crazy driving with him over the Andes Mountains. So that's me with the glider. That's at John Heine's shop in San Diego. John helps me, and so yeah, we're just doing some work on the glider at John's.
Wow.
Yep,
so nice.
Yep,
Really
that's a
nice.
220 Dream. So this glider was designed by Delta Wing. So I own the manufacturing rights of that glider. It's an older glider, but it flies just as good. The design flies just as good as a Falcon, if not better. John teaches all of his students on Dreams, and everybody's like, oh, it's an old design. Why do you still produce it? And people love it. So, why reinvent the wheel? It's a great glider. These gliders were used commercially in hang gliding operations all over the world for tandems. And so that's it. That's like a brand new one. So I'm just displaying it.
Beautiful. The same.
And that's it. That's another picture. That's the Lightning Bolt glider. This glider is actually going to go to a kid. He's like a famous kid. His name's Charlie. I got to remember the last name, but he's like a really, really nice guy. And this guy's like he is a snowboarder instructor and also hang glider pilot. He learned how to do his instruction and became an instructor at Kitty Hawk Kites, and then went on to Lookout Mountain, I believe, and then moved to Utah. And the guy's the nicest guy in the world. He's like up and coming pilot, probably future competition pilot. So that glider, I'm not giving it away, but I'm helping him so that he can get it, and he's going to use it so he can do tandems, and he's going to give us some exposure. He's probably going to bring that glider with us when we come to visit you, if we come to Rio de Janeiro in the spring.
Yes,
so that's a different one. That's Stan Miles is one of the first guys that did investment in Thunderbird to help us get off the ground. And that glider, these gliders were manufactured, I think, a couple years ago, so that no one was familiar with the brand name. So so that glider is used in a tandem operation back in Massachusetts. Tanner is the name of the place. And if you look in the background, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a dragonfly in the background, and the guy's named Ren that flies the dragonfly. They were in jeopardy of maybe losing that airport, but I think they're going to be able to hold on to it. So that's great. So we got to move forward. I'm running out of battery. Yeah, that's like that's another 220. Yeah, that was like just another one. So yeah, there's lots of them. So that glider is like that's from the New Zealand Nationals. It's a photograph. I always thought that was me actually for a really long time, but I actually realized it was a Moyes glider. I'm actually in the next photograph. A friend of ours took these pictures. A woman that I met, they're a really nice woman. She's a rock climber. Wonderful person. So we're still friends to this day. Okay, so that's me launching at the New Zealand. And this is actually after an injury. I got injured like a few years before, and that was my big comeback. I went back to New Zealand, and that glider is an Icaro glider, and it's still sitting there in New Zealand waiting for me if I ever get back. So that was a crazy launch. That's at a place called Wanaka. And it's an incredible place that you launch, and it's just sheer cliffs for thousands of feet, and just it's crazy. Like when you're, you feel so small. But anyways, beautiful place. So that's I'm launching.
Beautiful place
in the New Zealand Nationals. Yeah.
Who is this?
Okay, so that is Dan Barker, Bud Barker. He was like the original guy, the friend of Paul Hoffman, and that's the glider that belongs to his son. They were going to get back into hang gliding. The son never did it, but they're actually a really aviation family. They fly sailplanes now. So he wanted to get back into it. But he had his ratings from a long time ago, and they told him he had to go through the whole process. And he's like, I don't want to do that. I just want to go fly off Torrey Pines. And they were like, no, you got to take lessons. And he was like, I'm not going to do that. So they just moved on and bought a sailplane, and now they run the sailplane operations and run a composite business in Warner Hot Springs, really famous place. When the paragliders and hang gliders all came, it became too much traffic at Torrey Pines, so they moved out to Warner Hot Springs, and him and his son, they run that operation. He does all the repairs. So that's my friend from high school. Okay, that's me in that's Stinson Beach, California. So that's not my car. So that's a rich guy. He was parking there, and then we were parking the gliders there. And that flight is a really nice flight. You fly off of Mount Tamalpais. It's just across the bay from San Francisco. It's beautiful, beautiful.
When was this? Do you remember the year?
I don't know. Maybe 15 years ago. Maybe. It was like.
Okay.
And so so I asked the guy that car is a Porsche Sportster. It's the same car that James Dean had when he had his accident, like the famous actor. And so anyway, I was like, "Can I sit in your car and take a picture so I can be cool?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" So I got to sit in the car, and then that symbol with the claw. The guys from
he didn't ask you to change it. Okay, you get my car, I get your wing.
Signal. So basically, that's it.
The guy didn't want to change with you. You get my car, I get your wing. No?
I can't hear you, but no, it was just for fun. I mean, that's like, $100,000 car. So that's like my present, my dog. I found that dog, and some homeless people had the dog, and
so nice, so beautiful.
The dog's with me.
Do you think you can do the same like Curtis to take her to fly with you? Did you understand? Wow, I think we lost him. Are you there? Well, let's stop here. Well, I think we lost him, perhaps because of his battery, perhaps the connection. Well, I don't have him anymore. Okay. We still have something more to show. Yes. We were talking about this, and you see the Navajo tribal. Yes. Unfortunately, we lost him. And if we don't have our guest, we will stop the interview. I would like to talk something more, but since he's not here, well, thank you very much. Thank you to be here to watch our live, even if you have any technical problem here. Well, anyway, we have this recorded, and this is someone very important to our project. That's it. Bem, muito obrigada a você que está assistindo essa live. Infelizmente, tivemos algum problema técnico, talvez a queda da internet dele, ou talvez o término da bateria no qual ele estava usando o dispositivo. Mas ficou aqui registrado a história de Teddy Mack. Uma história importante, uma história que fala do pessoal da Califórnia, né? E hoje ele tem uma fábrica de asa em San Diego. E, se você quiser, tem aqui na descrição desse vídeo a história dele. Bem, é isso. Obrigada pela atenção e deixe aqui seu comentário, se quiser. e também inscreva-se, porque teremos outras entrevistas aqui bacanas para registrarmos a história do voo livre. É isso aí.